Hey, this is Tex. Yeah, thank you for stopping in again. I almost forgot something that I was asked to go over today, which is the idea of primary and secondary emotions. Some people refer to it as something similar to meta emotions. If you've heard of metacognitions, which is the idea about thinking, meta emotions or this primary and secondary emotions is the idea that you have an emotion and then you have an emotion about that emotion. So, what exactly does that mean, and how will it help you to understand that? Sometimes, when something happens, you have a primary emotion, same way as you have a primary cognition. In other words, somebody jumps out and screams "boo," and your immediate emotion would be, the fear, the oh, something happened, and you jump back. Now, that in itself is an emotion that's caused by a thing or an individual or a happening. So, the emotion you feel, you can directly correlate or directly look at and say, that has caused this. Okay. So, somebody steps on your toe, it hurts, and you have an immediate reaction to being stepped on. And that might be surprise or anger or whatever pops up, or even fear. So those things happen. And then what happens is a chain of events. You have emotions about emotions. The same way as when I talk to people, you have thoughts about thoughts. Your first thought may be, why did that person cut me off in traffic? That's an actual thought in your head. You may voice it, but you have it in your head. And then you have thoughts about them cutting you off, thinking, wow, they cut me off. And I'm thinking about that. And it's, this isn't fair and this isn't right. And you're starting to have thoughts about that thought about what happened. So in the case of the feelings, you're having emotions related to emotions. And if you can start to realize that, you can cut it off and say, okay, that person jumping out scared me. Then, if you get angry because you were scared or embarrassed because you were scared, see, here's where the secondary comes in. Then, as you start to have this secondary emotion, you start to mistake it as the primary emotion. So now, them jumping out yelling, boo, I'm embarrassed. And the embarrassment has to do with you being scared. So now, can you see how now we're starting to pull back into layers? And it can go in a long ways. Somebody can do something that makes you angry by saying something mean. They call you a name and you're angry. And then off of that anger, you start to have a whole bunch of other rolling emotions. And it could go a lot of different ways. You could be even more angry, go into rage or being furious at this, or the fact that you let somebody anger you, you could be embarrassed. Notice how you now have an emotion for that. In your embarrassment, then you could do something or say something that you wished you hadn't or whatever, and you could feel awkward, or you make up in your mind a whole scenario of the other person knows that you're embarrassed, and and then you get angry about that. And notice how all these things are just trickling off there. Again, it's this idea that it sets something in motion and you let it run away like a freight train. So pulling back when you have this and going, okay, what was the primary emotion? See, we're back to something similar to that CBT triangle. The idea that when something happens, an event, you have a thought and you have a feeling and you may have a behavior. And a lot of people have a hard time pulling back to that little moment in time. Again, the person pulls in front of you and cuts you off. And you think, you know, usually if you're like me, that there's a cuss word and that's your first thought, it's the cuss word. And it may be followed by some anger as a feeling. And then your reaction when you do that, your initial reaction is going to be a body reaction. You're going to grimace or growl or clench your teeth or your fist, but you're going to have a body emotion to that anger. And then as that stokes the fires, you go into more thoughts. they did it on purpose. They saw me here, they're trying to make me mad. Notice how you're having all these thoughts and it keeps trickling across that because then those lead to more feelings, more actions, and you get caught in this spiral. Emotions do the same thing. Being able to distinguish what was your first thought, what was your first emotion, and knowing that, okay, they cut me off and I immediately got angry. Okay. And then you can deal with that. But if you get angry and then you feel, indignant about it, and then you get into a rage about it, and then you get embarrassed and you don't want no one to know how embarrassed you are because you let something like that that's so small now anger you, and now you're embarrassed and you're trying to hide it. And by trying to hide it, oh my gosh. So being able to pull this down and understand what are our primary emotions, the initial ones we feel about a thing or an object, and then the emotions that we have about that emotion. Or in the case of meta emotions, it's emotions and thoughts that go off of this initial feeling, this initial emotion. So breaking that down allows you to start thinking about what's going on. There's such a thing as this behavioral analysis. And if you do a functional behavioral analysis, you're breaking down things step by step. And sometimes you have to do it on paper until you're good at it. This event happened. You screamed at somebody, and somebody says, "Well, what happened right before you screamed?" And you want to jump way over here to, well, they cut me off in traffic. They slammed the door in my face. They called me a bad name. There's a lot of things that go between the two, and there's a lot of things that build up. So being able to do the analysis and go, well, right before I screamed at them, I was thinking how I'm going to make them pay for this. Oh, see, now we've got something. You're plotting revenge, or I'm embarrassed, or they shouldn't be that way to me. You're having all these thoughts. So start marking them down and taking a sheet of paper and put the events in there. And then look, see if there's events between events, if there's thoughts between thoughts and emotions between emotions, because these are all links in a chain. And once you do that, you realize that if you could go back, you could break any link and possibly stop the event from happening. You screaming at somebody, or you doing something you wished you wouldn't have done. So even though it seems lightning fast, there's a lot going on there. There's a primary emotion and a primary thought that leads to other stuff. Okay, so I hope that answers the person's questions. And I'll get more into functional analysis in one of my other videos. I promise I'm getting around to all this stuff. I'm trying to share as much as I can. And again, thank you so much for listening. And I really hope that some of the things I say help you, that it sparks some conversations either between you and your friends, or if you're another therapist watching this, between you and other therapists, that you go out and you look and hunt for more information to help you understand these concepts and ideas that I'm talking about. Because when you get these concepts and these ideas down, and then you start to integrate them into what you're doing, you will find that your life radically changes. And that's what it's all about, is getting change and getting positive change that will help you become the person that you want to be and lead the life that you want. Thank you again, and y'all have a great day.